progressing? How are you progressing in your struggle against birth and death? And this is sort of the subject matter for sadhus. Um, and so I remember Bhakti Mādhava Purī Mahārāj as a sincere, inquiring truth seeker who connected with Srila Śrīpād Mahārāj back in the 1980s, around the time we were putting together Subjective Evolution of Consciousness. And uh, he took part in something that was called the Bhaktivedanta Institute, which I'm sure you must be familiar with because of your association with him. But back in the 1970s, um, we were publishing, the Bhaktivedanta Book Trust was publishing the fifth canto of the Bhagavatam. And this led to a lot of polemic discussion between the disciples of Srila Prabhupada at the time. And there were other things on the table as well. For example, a book that was published called Life Comes from Life. And in that book, it was argued that uh, there's no way that the human soul or the Atma is produced from some combination of chemicals. Uh, Obviously, spiritual material must proceed from spiritual material. That was the basic argument of that book that was published by the BBT. And that was also somehow connected with the Bhaktivedanta Institute. So Srila Prabhupada at that time in the 1970s, he liked the idea of founding a serious academic institute that would, as as John Milton put it, justify the ways of God to man, or in other words, give a reasonable argument for faith, and in particular for the Krishna conscious faith. Hare Krishna Prabhu, it's good to see you. It's good to see Adwai. This is Adwai Krishna Prabhu and Pranashish Prabhu, who you know. Uh, and who knew Mādhava Purī perhaps much better than I did. But my association with him was on the basis of we were producing another book called Subjective Evolution of Consciousness in the 1980s. This is a few years later. But the Bhaktivedanta Institute then went on to publish a number of different titles, one of which dealt with uh, quantum physics. That I believe that was published by Sariputta Das, who was Richard Thompson. Uh, and of course, there was Swarup Damodar Prabhu, who later became Bhakti Swarup Damodar Mahārāj. But at some point in time, uh, there may have been some differences between uh, different lines of thought uh, among the disciples of Srila Prabhupada, those who wish to absolutely construe that the cosmology spoken of in the Bhagavatam is 100% true fact, and it should be taken as it is. And others who took shelter of my Guru Dev, His Divine Grace Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Dev Goswami Maharaj, who did his best to put the teachings of the Bhagavatam in the correct light. And instead of taking an absolutely literal view of the fifth canto of Bhagavatam, gave us some light in terms of the following. He interpreted the teachings of Shukadev Goswami there in the light of Sanatana Goswami Mahārāj's teachings in the Brihad Bhagavatamrita. Just a moment. I'm gonna. Oh, this is the subjective evolution of consciousness here. I had it on my head. It looked a little strange. Anyway, oh, yeah, so the idea that life comes from life or Atma comes from Atma, it's a very provocative idea and has been scientifically advanced by different thinkers. I'm under pressure. It's hard for me to remember all the different, books that have been written following that. But the idea is that the very ground of existence, to put it that way, is Atma. That means that there's the absolute world and the relative world. And in fact, there may be many relative worlds and many relative planes of consciousness. And so when these relative planes of consciousness are addressed in the Bhagavatam as different planetary systems, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're physically and geographically stacked like plates, on a table. And when it says that this planetary system is above that planetary system, the word above, it's kind of relative. What's the difference between over and above? In English, people ask, I'm a teacher, they ask me that. What's the difference between over? The cup is over the table, the cup is above the table, the cup is on the table. So these are prepositions of place, which have a relative setting, above and below. The lower planetary systems are below. But in the second canto of the Bhagavatam, we're told to see the universe as concentric spheres, and beyond this sphere is another sphere and another one. So we use the word beyond. If you consider, the Copernican revolution and the heliocentric universe, it's hard to configure a cosmology that is sort of straight up and down. And we don't really do that anymore. Srila Sridhar in Subjective Evolution, when he's discussing the idea of Rahu, he says, well, this is geographically impossible. And that's to be noted. He's telling you this is geographically impossible. So how is that to be interpreted? And he told us of how well he spoke with Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. And he said, well, can't we consider Rahu as a kind of shadow consciousness? And this is kind of a metaphoric idea, the idea of light coming into the universe, the idea of the soul entering into the physical universe, as it's described in the Brahma Samhita. Passing through some sort of shadow consciousness. Should we represent Rahu like that? And it appears from what I can glean from the discussions of Srila Sridhar Maharaj and Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, that Saraswati Thakur was a bit non-committal on that point. He neither endorsed nor took issue with what Srila Sridhar Maharaj had posited there. Then again, there's an interesting point of departure between Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur and Bhaktivinoda Thakur. Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he liked the Punjika of a man named Bachi. It was an old style astrological configuration of, Hindu cosmogony. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta favored a newer interpretation. but when he discovered that Bhaktivinoda Thakur liked the older version, he followed that, thinking, I have to respect what my guru says, you know. So if I look at this fine point of distinction or non-distinction, because it, as I said, Bhaktisiddhanta was non-committal on this point, uh, between Srila Sridhar Maharaj and Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, whose side am I to take? Well, I side with Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Dev Goswami Maharaj, who tries to point out that some of what's in the Bhagavatam can be seen as metaphorically representing levels of consciousness, not strictly geographical locations. And that appeals to me, and it seems to make very good sense. Another thing he points out is uh, if us were just learning now, um, the whole Big Bang idea, it might end in a sort of a collapse and another Big Bang. And perhaps the latest Big Bang was the result of a former collapse of the universe and a new singularity was produced. Like that, there are some scientists who argue for this now. Um, it sounds a lot like Mahavishnu breathing the universe in and breathing the universe out, or another day of Brahma. You know, it's another day, another universe. Okay, time to get up. What are we doing now? We're going to make the universe. Okay, how do we do that? Mantra, mental energy. Maybe in one day of Brahma, he gets up and he makes it, you know, a little bit more out of mental substance, and another day it's more towards the mantra side. Not every creation is equal. And in, you know, Hindu mythology or the Bhagavatam or, you know, the universe as it's posited by the ancient Vedic sages, uh, it may be that in one creation there's a slightly distinct formation of the Brahmanda, the universal egg, than in another creation. So that what's given at one point in the Bhagavatam by Shukadev Goswami and what's given in another section in the Bhagavatam by Brahma to Narada, um, we can say, well, perhaps these are references to different creations so that we're not under any kind of onus to justify absolutely what appears to be a geographical impossibility. And so this is the sort of conversation that I would have with Mādhava Purī Maharaj, with Bhakti Siddhir Goswami Maharaj attending. They would be going back and forth trying to understand, well, what is the position of Rahu here? How are we to envision a subjective universe? What does that really mean? If the Bhaktivedanta Institute is looking to uh, develop an alternative scientific explanation for the origin of species, then how do we go about doing that? And what is Sri Rama's really trying to say here about evolution? And his point on evolution is very powerful. Um, he's not trying to go head to head with Darwin and refute Darwin. That's already been done. Darwin really has no relevance for the 21st century. Nobody believes in it's, you see, if we take it as a belief, you know, nobody really believes in what Darwin had to say. He had some interesting ideas. You know, he said, well, okay, there's infinite gradation. I'm sure he didn't like to use the word infinite, but, you know, the, there's an extreme variety of gradation between one species and the next. Isn't it logical to think that this species gradually became that species? But there's no evidence that one species becomes another species. All you have is evidence of infinite gradation. And the infinite gradation of material bodily forms suggests the infinite gradation in different levels of consciousness. So what you're seeing here is here's Atma, here's infinite gradation in Atma. And this is how Atma takes shape in different physical forms. And, you can work that out. You're the scientist. This is the sort of, and so in The Search for Sri Krishna, which was the first book we published at Guardian of Devotion Press, that's including conversations between then, Michael Marchetti and, also Swarup Damodar and others, Dayadhar Gauranga, who's identified there as a doctor, trying to ferret out how do we represent the idea of spiritual consciousness and divinity in an age where people have lost their faith. And so Srila Sri Rama spoke about the absolute and the relative. There's the absolute world and there's the relative world. So this is, I found it strange in a way that you asked me what were my pastimes with, or what was, Madhava Puri Maharaj's pastimes in San Jose, because I'm sure we took prasadam together, and we chanted Hare Krishna together, and he sat and gave a few classes. But my takeaway from that time is what we studied and thought about and tried to learn about the dichotomy between faith and reason. Um, so I don't mean to disappoint in terms of that, but I remember Madhava Puri Maharaj as a very sweet man. He's a humble soul. Many of the disciples of Srila Prabhupada took it upon themselves to try to represent Prabhupada's attitude, which was bombastic often. He had this powerful preaching style. And so many of my godbrothers adopted that and did their best to emulate Srila Prabhupada's sharp preaching style. But Madhava Puri Maharaj, he was just a sweet man. He was soft-spoken, uh, gentle, a gentle giant, if you will, a great teacher who took to heart the idea that he was to, um, as I said, justify the ways of God to man, to try to give a reasonable understanding of what Krishna consciousness was. And I remember the ideas that he represented, but in terms of personal, vapu, he was a sweet man. He would come and stay with us in the San Jose temple and chant Hare Krishna and search for Sri Krishna together. And he was a great warrior in a very subtle sense because he was fighting the war of ideas. And so I don't know if that helps you at all.
Please accept my humble Dandavat, Mahayogi Maharaj. Um,
Hare Krishna.
I think what you have recounted is Śrīpād Puri Maharaj himself would be more happy to be remembered for the conception that he was trying to represent and work out for the service of Guru Gauranga, rather than some external bodily relations. So thank you very much for um, doing that. Um, I was wondering if, so a week ago, Maharaj passed away formally yesterday. It
Ah,
was withdrawn yesterday. Yesterday, right at the cusp of Ekadasi, which was the third, and yesterday, so legally, he was declared um, passed at 12:02 a.m. on October 4th. Although my mother, Tulsi Maharani Devi Dasi, and I were present with him during his last breath, which was 11:02 p.m. on October 3rd, which was Ekadasi. The fourth is, of course, the disappearance day of Srila Raghunath Das Goswami, Srila Raghunath Bhatta Goswami, and Krishnadas Kaviraj. So this was his disappearance pastime yesterday. But 1 week ago, while he was still obviously very sick, I've been trying to reach out to different devotees that have engaged with Maharaj in the past and engage with them in various ways, trying to kind of at least bring up, if not try to fulfill some of Maharaj's interactions with them. So that included some of other devotees engaged in Bhaktivedanta Institute preaching, and especially those working with the TOBP right now. And we had some affectionate reciprocal messages, and the last message I sent to them that was approved by His Holiness Śrīpād Bhakti Mādhava Puri Mahārāj was about how to possibly think about what Srila Sridhar Maharaj's idea was for the TOVP when he presented it to Srila Prabhupada, and what that might look like from the development of the preaching work that Śrīpād Puri Maharaj has taught me about within his Princeton Bhaktivedanta Institute. So I was wondering if you would allow me, in the mode of humble service to the assembled Vaishnavas and in the mode of trying to seek approval or constructive criticism, if I can read the email that explains what Srila Sridhar Maharaj's conception for a TOVP visual thing might look like. It doesn't use the name of any of the devotees we spoke with. It just kind of is like 5, 6, 7 paragraph thing where we
Sure,
try
go
to go
ahead.
into as much detail as possible.
Go ahead. We'd love to hear that.
Hare Krishna. So, I have conveyed your sympathy and desire to help my Gurudev. He replied by first expressing his affection for you, and then he expressed the desire for more integrative efforts between your work and our work. Madhava Puri Maharaj's perspective on the complementarity of Bhagavad Vedanta and Hegelian philosophy/theology, and how this relates to the philosophy of science, as well as the present consciousness-centered paradigm shift in modern biology, especially in modern science, especially biology, can benefit your efforts. He also expressed that the teachings that he received from Srila B.R. Sridhar Maharaj, which include the relevance of Hegel, can be helpful in the TOVP/Science Museum. Puri Maharaj has dedicated his whole life to BI Seva, and his conception is very valuable, as I demonstrated in a recent peer-reviewed paper. If we can somehow move forward in a harmonious and non-sectarian way, then the inherent purpose of the Bhaktivedanta Institute as a distinguished instrument for the dissemination of Mahaprabhu's and Radha Krishna's glories will manifest in the most tasteful, deeply fulfilling, and widely influential way. The history of BI and TOVP is one that transcends institutional boundaries, revealing the intimate and loving relationship between Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's two stalwart disciples, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada and Srila Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Dev Goswami Maharaj. The name Bhaktivedanta, by which the BI was named, was given to Prabhupada by Sridhar Maharaj, and Prabhupada considered Sridhar Maharaj his Siksha Guru who prepared him for the miraculous preaching mission that His Divine Grace was about to embark on. Reciprocally, Sridhar Maharaj revealed that Prabhupada was the Shakti Avesha avatar of Nityananda Prabhu, as he wholeheartedly recognized and appreciated the unique quality of Prabhupada to be the only one with the capacity to fulfill Bhaktisiddhanta's and Bhaktivinoda's desire of spreading Krishna consciousness throughout the entire world. Sridhar Maharaj saw this as non-different from the liberal distribution of Mahaprabhu's mercy by Nityananda. Further, the TOVP was a project that Sridhar Maharaj originally suggested to Prabhupada. He suggested that Prabhupada utilize the resources at his disposal to make a Vedic planetarium. Sridhar Maharaj's idea was to depict the evolution of consciousness that Gopakumar experienced in Sri Sanatana Goswami's Brihad Bhagavatamrita. One recording of this being explained is available here and another here, and I linked 2 videos. This is such a glorious and beautiful history, so why not align our present trajectory with this sublime foundation? Wouldn't we all benefit from that in the highest way possible? Puri Maharaj says that the 2 principles that Srila Prabhupada gave to the BI were 1, that life and matter come from life, and 2, depicting Bhagavat cosmology in a planetarium. The first principle means that the self is a conscious spiritual being distinct from the physical body. We attempt to make this distinction through philosophical and scientific studies, demonstrating that consciousness has a distinct and irreducible relevance in biological phenomena. As Krishna explains in Gita 2.13, there's a difference between the conscious self and the body. Modern science has decided that the body, the physical, is the foundation of reality. But devotees know that consciousness is fundamental and that matter is derivative of consciousness. This is what matter comes from life points to. Then, even the universe itself has a conscious origin. Bhagavatam starts by establishing the conscious principle before anything else. Janmadasyata navyad itaratas charvesh avijasarat. Everything is born from that which is cognizant and independent. But again, scientists choose to believe that the origin of the universe is physical. Therefore, the devotees understand that consciousness or chit is fundamental to the existence of life and the universe, whereas scientists believe that mere existence or sat is fundamental. The Vedas tell that Sat, Chit, Ananda are the integrated aspects of reality, and that the BI is meant to facilitate the education of this integration. Bhakti Vedanta, where Bhakti equals love and Vedanta equals the conclusion of knowledge, means that the conclusion of knowledge is love. It appears that one of the primary objectives of the TOBP Science Museum is to contextualize and reorient scientists' notions of an isolated existence, Sat, within the field of consciousness that determines that existence, Chit. Then, Rupa Goswami and our Guru Varga will teach the Ananda, the fulfillment of consciousness in the transcendental bliss of Krishna consciousness. So, from the perspective of Srila Sridhar Maharaj's teachings, what should the planetarium show? He intended it to be the visual representation of Brihad Bhagavatamrita, which describes the evolution of consciousness from karma, the plane of exploitation, to jnana, renunciation, and finally to bhakti, dedication. Given that the conscious self is fundamental to worldly experience, when a self is absorbed in the plane of exploitation, then it experiences the world in a manner that is convenient for self-centered sense enjoyment. This is to perceive nature mechanistically, where there is no intrinsic purpose to phenomena, no irreducible or integral relation among the parts of wholes, and no internal agency or autonomy directing the activities of living entities. Thus, an exploiter can dominate any aspect of nature for their own purposes. This mechanistic ontology applies to both natural phenomena and man-made things, such as organizational and social structures. Here, every man, department, or nation is an island unto itself, to playfully repurpose John Donne's saying. However, when the provincial interests of these islands collide, competition, arguing, fighting, war, and perpetual suffering ensue. Thus Hegel called history a slaughter bench. This is the plane of consciousness in which scientists cling to the idea that existence is independent of consciousness. For those repulsed by the perpetuation of needless suffering due to defending egoic self-interest, they might recognize the interconnectedness among all living entities and realize that when one suffers, we all suffer. Hegel talks about the necessity of mutual recognition for self-consciousness, where a self's recognition of its own conscious nature relies on the reciprocal acknowledgement of another conscious entity. No man, department, or nation is an island unto itself. This is the real meaning of Donne's saying. Those who reach this realization experience the world in a very different way from exploiters. Instead of perceiving the world through the lens of mechanistic ontology, we can say that they superficially perceive an organic reality. Rather than natural phenomena, organizations, and societies being static entities lacking internal purpose and external connection to what is other than them, these entities are dynamic, internally related, as well as intrinsically related to other such entities. Rather than contributing to the exploitation in its various forms, renunciates fight against it and find comfort in solidarity with others who share such values. The most extreme form of renunciation is when one withdraws from worldly activity altogether. Further, reflection on the tension between exploitation and renunciation leads to the recognition of the primacy of consciousness, where consideration of exploiters and renunciates, seeing the world in very different ways, despite existing on the same planet, naturally leads to the conclusion that the consciousness through which we perceive the world largely determines the world within which we live. But the plane of renunciation does not positively address the inherent limitations of the finite entities. Individual and collective living entities inherently rely on things external to themselves, from physical needs for air, water, food, sunlight, and shelter, to the psychological needs of companionship and mentorship. Living entities are not self-sufficient, although they are self-perpetuating. They can only perpetuate themselves through dependence on external things. This is the fundamental limitation of finite selves, and recognition of this can inspire human beings to inquire deeper about the nature of the finite self and its relation to an infinite absolute foundation of reality, upon which all finitude depends and within which it is necessarily contextualized. This vision of reality as a self-conscious organic whole, within which finite entities serve unique self-conscious functions in relation to the whole, brings us to the plane of dedication or Krishna Bhakti. When all finite fields of knowledge, biology, ecology, sociology, cosmology, psychology, ontology, epistemology, theology, etc., are understood as expressions of the organic whole for its own purposes, carried out through finite agents which are ultimately dependent on and functionally related to the whole, then real progress can be made in awakening people to Krishna consciousness in a robustly scientific yet intuitively accessible way. All of this can be visually depicted very richly in so many ways. This is what Vedic wisdom offers, and it should not be ignored by the world at large. Acknowledging and deeply considering humanity's problems through this lens can help humanity to not only solve its current issues, but to adopt a positive, progressive, and transcendent goal towards which to move, achieving self-realization and love of God in the most concrete and deeply relevant way. Hare Krishna.
Well, that was very beautiful. Hare Krishna. And did you write that, or that was Mādhava Purī Mahārāj?
I wrote it with the guidance of Mahārāj, and then he approved it at the end.
Very nicely put. Very nicely put. Very beautiful. Pranashish, would you like to give some input? You knew him. There's no sound.
Just unmute yourself. Can you unmute?
Okay, that should be it.
Start again.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, again, I was very lucky to have a lot of personal association with Purī Mahārāj when he came to Ireland. Gopeshwar Prabhu brought him over for about 3 or 4 months. And so I would study with him every week. I had my day with him, just me and him. And we studied the Phenomenology of Spirit by Hegel. We went through the whole book.
Wow.
So it was very difficult for me because I'm no philosopher. I hadn't studied anything. I've never been to university. I've not done any of those things. And yet here was this wonderful, kind man who took upon himself to teach me Hegel, which it was only due to my own ignorance and lack of brain cells that I just couldn't get my head around at the end of the day. But I understood Hegel's desire to prove the existence of a divine being, which he did. In that book, he did. At the end of the book, there was a wonderful map of the universe, and it was like a mind map. It opened out. It was a page, and you opened up, and it opened up into a big page, a big, huge mind map of the universe according to Hegel. And if you followed that, it was clear that there was a divine energy, a divine something behind it all.
Looks like Keshava Prabhu has the mind map in front of him. He wants to show it
I've
to
tried for about 10 years to find it. It's not available in any. I've not been able to come across it. It was in that particular book that Purī Mahārāj got in 1984 whatever it was, and I've never come across it again.
He's
Yeah,
showing it
back in
here.
the
He's showing.
Say
Prabhu
again?
is, no, Prabhu is showing that book, actually.
Yeah, he's showing that book. Perhaps you could offer us a PDF of that somehow and send it to Pranashish. He knows about those things. Yeah, I remember going to when we were making the book, Subjective Evolution of Consciousness. I went to the library at San Jose State University and found, a 12-volume set of the works of Hegel and tried to ferret out the truth about Hegel's view of the universe. But that's pretty deep stuff, man. It would take you years to go through. So hats off to Mādhava Purī Mahārāj for helping decipher that. And you must have been amazed to hear from him the inner secrets of Hegel's philosophy,
Of
Pranashish.
course, but I remember walking home every evening after our little talks thinking, that poor man thinks I understand this. That poor man thinks I have a clue. That poor man, yeah. And I remember thinking, oh, I'm just a simple Irish boy that never even finished normal school, let alone university. But he had such faith in me. And he said, no. Whatever you can take from this, you will take from this. Don't worry. Don't give up. Keep at it. Keep at it. And yeah, we went through the whole book.
And we're very fortunate to have had Srila Śrīpād Mahārāj and Purī Mahārāj who could decipher that and then put it in a nutshell for us.
Yes, and you mentioned something else, Mahārāj. You mentioned he was a teacher.
Yes.
And you're a teacher. Srila Guru Mahārāj was a teacher. Prabhupada was, but all devotees aren't teachers. Teacher is a rare commodity. It's like 100 people play the guitar, but only 2 people can teach guitar.
That's right. Anyways, one needs great patience. And I suppose Purī Mahārāj was a good example of patience. He was very patient. Like, there's this expression, one doesn't suffer fools.
Gladly.
Right? One doesn't suffer fools. So Srila Prabhupada, he was a bit like that. Sometimes he just did not. Of course, he suffered in New York City with fools and beatniks and hippies and weirdos and, Allen Ginsberg and all these very strange, far-out people who came in and out of his life. But at some point, you could see, he did not suffer fools lightly. And when I was a young man, I took that position. I thought it should be my duty to correct people and teach them how to be, But I read this French essayist. He's not really a philosopher, Montaigne. And he has a nice essay called On Conversation. And in there, he said that, when I was a young man, I did not suffer fools lightly. And I had to correct everything everybody said. But the other day, a fool was talking to me and I didn't correct him. And I felt very proud of myself that I had learned tolerance. So that's one of the qualities of a great teacher, I think. Look at Haridas Thakur's example, tolerance. And it doesn't mean that we agree with what the fools are saying, but we have no appetite for trying to correct what the fool is trying to tell us. So yes, I'm sure Mādhava Purī Mahārāj was a great teacher, and that shines through in what we just heard from Krishna Keshava Prabhu. If you don't mind, I actually wrote a little something very quickly on the fly that I'd like to read, if that's okay. So Srila Śrīpād Mahārāj used to like to quote from this English poet, Thomas Gray. And I really love this quote because what it talks about is how there are sort of quiet souls, the quiet teachers who do not do everything in a performative way to get pomp and heraldry and position and fame, but they quietly do their bit and then retire from the stage. So in every age, uh, great saints and sages come and go, but sometimes the world passes lightly over these quiet souls who walk among us, bearing light unseen. So Thomas Gray, he says, the boast of heraldry, the pomp of power, and all that beauty, all that wealth e'er gave, awaits alike the inevitable hour. The paths of glory lead but to the grave. So worldly power and fame are fleeting. Uh, the monuments fade, the songs grow still. But within humble lives, within the hearts that bowed before the Lord rather than before men, there's a kind of beauty that's not born for worldly praise. So Srila Sri Ramakrishna would often quote from this other part of that same poem, where he says, full many a gem of purest ray serene, the dark unfathomed caves of ocean bare, full many a flower is born to blush unseen and waste its sweetness on the desert air. So there's desert sages, mountain sages, New Jersey sages that, like a ray of purest gem, like a gem, like a jewel of purest rays serene, never appear in public. You don't see them. You don't get to hear from them, like a hidden jewel in the depths of an ocean cave, or like a flower that blooms in a desert. And it has its sweet perfume, but we're not fortunate enough, maybe, to come in contact with that. Only a few very fortunate souls can contact that. So Madhava Puri Mahārāj may not have had thousands and thousands of disciples and a big mission, but like that unseen gem, he shined his ray for those who could appreciate it. And so he lived in quiet service, far from the noise of ambition, but his sweetness was not wasted, although it was unseen by the world. It perfumed the hearts of those who heard even a single word of Krishna Katha, Hari Katha, the teachings of Srila Prabhupada and Sri Ramakrishna from his lotus lips. And yet, another thing that Srila Sri Ramakrishna used to like to say all the time, and he attributed this to Hegel, but we find it also in Bhaktivinoda Thakur. A Vaishnava does not vanish into earth and dust. He does not disappear entirely. He's left this world, but he's gone to the absolute world where perhaps he can join in the kirtan with Govinda Mahārāj, Sridhar Mahārāj, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, somewhere. Bhaktivinoda says, he reasons ill who says that Vaishnavas die when thou art living still in sound. The Vaishnavas die to live, and living try to spread the holy name around. And then there's this other by Govinda Das. He says, Bhaja Hure Mana Sri Nandanandana Abhaya Charana Ravindare. That's a reference to the name of Bhaktivedanta Swami. And he says that life, it flickers like a drop of water on a lotus leaf. Durlabha manava janama satsange tarahe bhava sindure. Like that. Kamala dala jala jivana talamala bhaja hum haripara niti re. That everything that we try to do here, it's temporal. It's part of the relative world. One's wealth, youthfulness, sons, family members. This life is trembling like a drop of water on a lotus petal, and in a moment it drops off. So we should strive for the eternal by Shravana Kirtana, Smarana, Vandana, Parasevana, Dasyare, Pujana, all the different processes of devotional service. We should strive for eternal life with Krishna. And there's this song that we sometimes sing with the passing of a great soul, and I don't like to be performative and embarrass you with my musical lack of talent, but it's nice to remember. And this is by Narottam Das Thakur. Anilo Premadhana Corona Prachur Heno Prabhu Kota Gela Chajan Thakur Kahamora Swarupa Kakadasarunata Patita Pavan Kahamora Bhatta Jura Mahakavira Ekakale Kotangela Doranatara Pashane Kutivo Mata Anale Pashibo Gauranga Gunerani Kotagele Pavu Sheshava Shangira Shange Rekoilo Vila Shesangana Kaya Kande Narotamoda. He who brought the treasure of divine love and was filled with compassion, where has such a master as Acharya Thakur gone? Where are my Swarup Damodar and Rupa Goswami? Where is Sanatan Goswami? Where is Raghunath Das, the savior of the fallen? Where are my Raghunath Bhatta and Gopal Bhatta? Where's Krishna Das Kaviraj? Where did Gauranga, the king of dancers, suddenly go? I will smash my head against a stone and enter the fire. Where can I find Gauranga, the treasure house of divine qualities? Those intimate associates with whom he performed his pastimes, not having their association, Narottam Das weeps in separation. So sometimes I think many of my friends are no longer here. And I begin to understand a little bit what Narottam was talking about. Where's Sridhar Maharaj? Yeah. Where's Govinda Maharaj? Where have they gone? You know? But I'm sure they're there. I have that faith. You know, we're sitting in the relative world talking about the absolute world. But they're in the absolute world. They're dancing and singing. Once upon a time, Krishnadas Babaji Maharaj went to the doctor, and the doctor put his stethoscope to his heart. And Kaviraj, Babaji Maharaj, he said, you know, what do you hear? And the doctor said, I hear the kartals and mridanga of Gauranga Mahaprabhu's kirtan. Then again, I don't know if that was a good thing. That might have meant he had some kind of arrhythmia, you know. But there's the bell. I'm sure Krishna Keshav Prabhu has important things to take care of. And it's very, very difficult for me to talk about great souls like this and how they're no longer with us. It's not something I'm really very good at. I like talking about philosophy and Hegel and, you know, other world cosmology. But I'm told that Sivasani Meenakshi Sundaram is soon to translate Subjective Evolution of Consciousness into Tamil, yes?
Actually, I have, except for the first two chapters and the very last chapter, I went through the whole, I have done the whole one for the first.
Wow, I'm impressed. You might, you know, try publishing that as a magazine article or something, you know?
But I find it like the first chapter and the second chapter. I mean, I started with that because to begin from the very beginning, but I found it very hard to to deeply understand all that. So I left the first two chapters and then started from the third chapter, and which I was able to do. But I'm just now starting from the beginning, from the first chapter, which is, like what you talked about, this now, the Chidabhas, and also the Ragu, the shadow consciousness, all that, comes in the first chapter. Those concepts are, little, I have to understand more about that. But I'm trying by the mercy Gurudev and all the Vaishnavas, your help, probably I would be able to finish it.
So you see, Krishna Keshava Prabhu, what was taught by Srila Sridhar Maharaj and Mādhava Purī Mahārāj, these are very profound, very deep teachings that one can spend 20, 30, 40, 50 years trying to understand completely, like a Chintamani gem that you hold to the light and it's giving me something different over here. Wait a minute. And if I look at it from this angle, I see something different. And so Meenakshi Sundaram is translating something for 20, 30 years, just reflecting on that and thinking about it. These are the kind of spiritual jewels that were given out by Mādhava Purī Mahārāj. And that's a treasure that will last forever. And you're very fortunate to have had close association with such a sincere Vaishnava saint. I have some things to take care of this morning, so I want to close this meeting. Did you still want to talk on the Zoom, Krishna Keshava, or is this enough?
Maharaj, this is more than I could have ever imagined. Thank you very much. And I can only humbly pray that in the future, by Krishna's grace and my Gurudev's grace, I can continue to associate with the sincere souls such as yourself.
All right. And this this meeting has been recorded, so you can hear it again if you want to. You can listen to how you were reading your article and see if there needs to be any correction or extension. Sometimes it's very good if you write something to read it and then listen to it again, because you're able to detect, I could make that a little more subtle, or I could extend that point. Okay? All right. Advai Krishna Prabhu, would you like to add something? You're very quiet. You have to unmute your microphone. perhaps not.
Yeah, well, I just assure I didn't have I wasn't lucky enough to ever met Bhakti Mādhava Purī Mahārāj, and so it was wonderful to hear from Krishna Keshava Prabhu, from yourself, and just thinking about what you were talking about earlier, and even in the following weeks about when you need fresh water, you need to look for it, and it doesn't matter if it comes in a big, river or just springing from the ground. If you need fresh water, you will find it, and probably Puri Maharaj, even as you said, he didn't have a big mission or anything, but he was bringing that fresh water that is giving us life. So thank you guys, because I'm very ignorant, but it's nice to be in the company of such great human beings and devotees.
Well, there was a man, Goswami Maharaj told me, I never met him, but Goswami Maharaj told me there was this man who, at the Bhagavatam class in the Calcutta temple, when they concluded the meeting, there was one Indian gentleman who used to stand up and he would say, when they were doing Gaura Bhakti Vrinda Ki Jai and all that, he would stand up and say, "Whole world, sunshine, Prabhupada." And I think we'll leave on that note. Whole world, sunshine, Prabhupada.
Wow.
We'll see you next time. Hare Krishna and Gaura Bhakti Vrinda Ki Jai. Devotees Ki Jai. Bye-bye.
Jai Mahayogi Guru Jai, Bhakti Mādhava Purī Mahārāj Ki Jai. Thank you so much, Krishna Keshav Prabhu, for joining and reading that beautiful note. Actually, I would like to maybe have a copy of that sometime, if you can. Yes.
Certainly. Sir Vashini Didi, I believe I can contact you on Facebook. Is that okay, or what do you prefer?
I'm not on, well, I am on Facebook. I don't